There's a kind of tired that doesn't show up in your eyes or your posture, but in the way you breathe, in the way you hold your shoulders just a little too high, like you're bracing for something. It's not exhaustion from lack of sleep. It's not even from doing too much. It's from being too much for too long, from holding everything together, from scanning the room, scanning your mind, scanning yourself, just to make sure nothing breaks. And somewhere along the way, you forgot what it felt like to simply exist. Not perform, not adjust, not monitor. Just exist, raw, unfiltered, unstrategic. But how could you have remembered? You were taught early on that safety came with structure. That love had to be earned. That chaos was always one step behind, waiting for your guard to drop. So you became the one who planned, who managed, who made sure no one else had to feel discomfort, not because you weren't hurting, but because it felt easier to carry it all than to let any of it fall. You learned to stay ahead of pain, to outthink it, to outgrow it. But no one told you that peace doesn't come from running faster. It comes from stopping long enough to realize you were never supposed to be the one driving this thing alone. And yet, here you are, breath shallow, thoughts loud, heart tired, wondering why nothing ever feels truly calm. Wondering why, even in the quiet, your mind keeps whispering, "What am I missing?" Maybe it's not that you're missing anything. Maybe you're just missing you. The version of you who wasn't holding the reins so tight. The one who used to laugh without measuring how it sounded. Who cried without apology. Who trusted a little more, questioned a little less. That version of you didn't disappear. They're just buried under all the stories you've been told about control perfection and how strong you're supposed to be. But let's pause here, not to fix, not to analyze, just to feel, just to remember. You were never meant to carry everything. You were meant to be here. It doesn't always look like control. Sometimes it looks like responsibility, like maintaining your healing, like monitoring your moods, your thoughts, your tone in every conversation, like checking and double-checking whether you're doing it right. You tell yourself you're just being self-aware, just growing. But underneath that calm, mindful surface, something's gripping, something's tightening. And the truth is, that's not awareness. It's surveillance of your own soul. You don't trust life to unfold anymore. You don't trust yourself to feel and respond naturally. You rehearse what to say, how to feel, how to react just in case it's wrong, just in case someone misunderstands, just in case one misstep makes it all fall apart. You call it discipline, but deep down it's fear wearing the outfit of composure, fear of slipping, of going too far, of being seen without filters. And it's quiet, isn't it? That fear doesn't scream. It hums in the background while you journal. It hides behind your smile when you say, "I'm okay." It moves through your habits like a shadow dressed up as structure. And it's exhausting because you're not just carrying your responsibilities. You're carrying your image, your healing, your progress, your identity as someone who should know better by now. But no one ever told you that healing doesn't mean mastering every emotion, that growth doesn't mean perfecting your presence. You were never meant to monitor every breath. There's a difference between caring for your soul and managing it like a checklist. And somewhere between trying to hold it all together, you lost the space to feel anything real. Not the curated version, the actual one, the awkward, unfiltered, unexpected one, the kind that doesn't ask permission. It just arrives. It just is. That's what you've been missing. Not more control, more aliveness. They told you control was wisdom, that it meant you were mature now, that being thoughtful and planned and self-contained was the mark of someone who gets it. And for a while you believed it. How could you not? When the world felt unstable control gave you something to hold, something to prove you were okay, something that said, look, I'm healing, I'm responsible, I'm strong. But it was never safety. It was tension, wrapped in good intentions. And maybe that's the cruelest part of it, how convincing it all is. How easy it is to confuse effort with peace. To believe that if you do enough inner work, push through enough discomfort, anticipate every storm, you'll finally feel free. But freedom doesn't come from doing more. It comes from needing less. And this kind of control, it's not clarity. It's not wisdom. It's white-knuckled survival in a spiritual disguise. You meditate not to connect with yourself, but to manage your panic. You journal not to understand, but to scan your inner world for threats. You go to therapy not to open your heart, but to make sure it stays tightly wrapped and trauma-proof. That's not healing. That's self-rejection in a beautiful frame. You keep telling yourself you'll rest once you've earned it. Once you've figured it all out. Once you've healed the right way spoken, the right way showed up the right way. But peace doesn't arrive with a checklist. It arrives when you stop performing. Like peace is something outside yourself, something you chase instead of embody. You're not tired because you're broken. You're tired because you've been sprinting toward safety that doesn't exist, at least not where you've been looking. Safety was never in the routine, never in the checklist, never in the version of you that feels like work to maintain. Safety is when your body stops bracing, when your soul stops apologizing, when you can sit in a quiet room, no plan, no performance, and still feel like you belong. That's not weakness. That's finally coming home. Let's be honest. Sometimes what we call growth is just fear wearing nicer clothes. You weren't trying to be perfect for applause. You were just scared of the mess. Scared that if you let go, even for a moment, something or someone would break. And maybe you. So, you kept reaching for the polished version of yourself. The gentle, wise, well-spoken self who never spirals, never snaps, never forgets to breathe. The version who is easy to love. Because deep down, part of you still believes love is conditional. That your softness has to be balanced with strength. That your chaos must be managed before you're safe to be around. And it's not your fault. You learn to earn your place in rooms, in hearts, even in your own mind. You learn to apologize for emotions before they even arrived. You edited your instincts, softened your truth, called it discernment, but really it was fear. Fear that being too much would make people leave. Or worse, fear that your too muchness was actually true. So you tried to be good instead. You gave. You smiled. You stayed calm when your body was screaming. You stayed kind when your soul was shaking. You carried the role of the one who holds it all, and you wore it well, until it wore you down. Because no matter how perfectly you hold yourself together, If it's not real, it will never be enough to feel like home. You can only feel truly safe when you're truly yourself. And that means messy. That means unfiltered. That means present. Not polished, not performed, not predicted. Real. Because what if the people who truly love you aren't here for your control, your poise, or your progress? What if they're here for the you underneath all that? What if you don't need to be good to be worthy? What if worth was never about how well you manage the discomfort, but how bravely you show up in it? You've spent so long trying to be what others needed. But what if you are what you need now? And what if that's enough? It happened on a Tuesday. Nothing special about it. The sun rose, traffic hummed outside the window, and the day unfolded like any other. But something shifted. Not with noise, not with ceremony, just quietly. There was a moment, a small one, when the version of me who usually jumps in to manage to smooth to correct didn't. Someone said something that on any other day would have triggered an entire mental response script. The kind where you rehearse your reply in 3 tones, where you make sure you're understood, not misread, where you try to hold space for them while squeezing yourself into something digestible. But this time, I didn't respond that way. I felt the reaction rise, that familiar tightening in my chest, that subtle tension behind my eyes. But instead of clinging to it, I paused, and I let it pass. Not because I was enlightened, not because I had rehearsed it in therapy, but because something inside me was tired of the game, tired of overperforming peace. So I said nothing, not out of avoidance, but out of freedom. And what happened next was nothing. The world didn't end. No one stormed out. I didn't shatter. I stayed whole, untouched by the chaos I used to fear. That moment, so simple, so easy to miss, was a crack in the armor. A place where something soft could enter again. A reminder that I don't have to grip life so tightly for it to keep going. You see, that's the strange paradox. When you finally stop rehearsing your emotions, they arrive softer. When you stop bracing for the worst, your body begins to trust the present. That's what surrender really looks like. It's not giving up. It's giving over. Giving over the need to manage every heartbeat, every word, every outcome. And in return, you get something you haven't felt in years. Breath that doesn't ask permission. A body that doesn't flinch at the unknown. A soul that truly knows it's safe now. Not because life is predictable, but because you are no longer at war with it. No one prepares you for how quiet peace is. Not the kind of quiet that comes from avoiding, but the kind that comes from no longer running, no longer proving, no longer fixing things that were never broken. And it sneaks in, not like a breakthrough, not like the fireworks of healing you thought would mark your arrival, but like a subtle exhale, the kind you didn't even know you were holding. It shows up in the pauses, in the moments you don't rush to fill, in the space between the need to react and the choice not to. Suddenly, you're not calculating every step 5 moves ahead. You're not narrating your life in your mind like a strategist trying to anticipate disaster. You're simply here, in this breath, in this body, in this moment. It feels strange at first, like stepping into someone else's skin. But soon you realize it's not someone else. It's you. The real you. The you who was waiting beneath all the layers of control, of preparation, of guardedness. and your body knows it before your mind does. Your shoulders drop without you commanding them to. Your jaw loosens in conversations. Your responses slow down, not because you're trying to be mindful, but because you're not afraid anymore. You begin to trust that not everything needs to be managed, that not every silence needs to be filled, that not every discomfort is a threat. And with that trust comes something else presence. Not the forced kind, not the one you meditate your way into or script in your morning journal, but the kind that just happens. That surprises you in the middle of a mundane moment, maybe while washing dishes, or walking home, or staring out the window. You feel the world again, not through the mind's filter of caution and calculation, but through the raw, simple sensation of being here. And in that moment, you don't need to have the answers. You don't need to fix yourself. You don't even need to call it healing. You just know you're safe. And for the first time, that's not something you tell yourself. It's something you believe. Because the shift you didn't know you needed wasn't more control. It was permission to be. There comes a moment when the version of you who's been managing everything starts to feel unfamiliar. Not wrong, just heavy. Like a coat you've been wearing in summer, convincing yourself it's needed even as you sweat underneath it. And when you finally take it off, the breeze touches skin you forgot was there. This is what it's like to meet yourself without the armor, without the narrative, without the constant need to explain who you are, why you feel what you're working on. At first it's unsettling, because the person you've been, the one who always has it together, who always knows what to say, who tracks every shift in energy in the room, that version became your protector, your identity, your proof that you were safe. So when you let that version rest, you might feel lost. You might look in the mirror and wonder, who am I without all this effort? Without the control, without the curation, without the self-awareness loop spinning endlessly in the background? The answer doesn't always come in words. Sometimes it comes in laughter that escapes before you can filter it. Sometimes it comes in tears that rise without a narrative attached. Sometimes it comes in stillness that no longer feels like failure. You start to recognize the parts of you that don't need a reason to exist. The spontaneous, the quiet, the awkward, the soft, the wild. And something inside you whispers, I've missed this. You don't need to spiritualize it. You don't need to name it. You just let it be. Because maybe healing was never about becoming someone new. Maybe it was always about remembering someone old, someone honest, someone buried under layers of control and coping and performance. Someone who didn't need to know everything to trust the next step. Someone who didn't need to be perfect to be present. And when you meet that version of yourself, again, unfiltered, undone, untouched by the need to impress, you begin to understand. You were never lost, just hidden beneath everything you thought you had to be. You don't always notice when the performance ends. There's no applause, no curtain drop, just the quiet disassembly of all the roles you built to survive. And for a moment you panic, because who are you without them? Without the practiced calm, without the curated insight, without the identity of being the one who always knows how to navigate pain. It feels like falling until you realize you're not falling, you're landing. For the first time in a long time, you're touching the ground of your own being. Not the elevated platform you stood on to be admired. Not the tightrope you walked to seem balanced. Just solid earth, soft, steady, honest. And that's where your soul returns. Not in grand revelations, not in transcendent downloads, but in the tender, ordinary moments. Waking up without a plan for how to be. Speaking without mapping every word. Breathing without bracing for interruption. You start to notice yourself again, not the version of you that exists in people's eyes, but the one that simply is. The one who laughs too loud sometimes, who forgets the point mid-sentence, who tears up at small kindnesses and gets quiet when the world feels too sharp. This is your soul coming back from exile, because performance is a prison even when it's beautiful, even when people applaud, even when it keeps you safe. But safety that costs your aliveness isn't safety, it's sacrifice. And you're done sacrificing. You're done contorting your truth for comfort. You're done translating your emotions for acceptance. You're done editing your wholeness down to what's palatable. You're not here to be the strong one anymore. You're here to be the real one. Because strength isn't holding it all. It's knowing when to put it down. When to say, I'm tired. When to say, I don't know. When to stop trying to shine and let yourself simply exist. That's not collapse. That's coming home. And in that homecoming, the performance fades. And your soul, soft, sacred, unpolished, steps forward. Not to be seen, but to live. You don't suddenly become someone new. You just start becoming who you were. Before the noise, before the pressure, before the invisible contracts you signed to always be fine, always be strong, always be enough for everyone but yourself. And it's strange at first. Life slows down. Not because you're doing less, but because you're no longer rushing to outrun your own discomfort. You're not chasing validation in every interaction. You're not performing presence, you're living it. You speak slower not to sound wise, but because you're listening while you talk. You breathe deeper, not as a technique, but because your body finally believes it's safe. The silence doesn't feel threatening anymore. You don't scramble to fill it, you settle into it. You realize you don't need to prove you're okay. You don't even need to be okay. You just need to be here with what's true, with what's real, even if it's messy. And the people around you, they notice. Some draw closer, not because you're more impressive now, but because you're more you. Accessible, present, not hidden behind effort, not layered in tension. Others may drift, not because you failed them, but because the version of you they were attached to was never meant to last. And that's okay. You no longer bend to stay in reach. You no longer perform to keep the peace. You no longer lose yourself to earn someone else's version of love. Because your peace isn't conditional anymore. It's not waiting at the end of your next breakthrough. It's not hidden behind your next achievement. It's here soft, subtle, almost imperceptible in the way your body doesn't flinch when you pause. In the way your soul whispers, I'm still here. And finally, you believe it. Not because someone said you're worthy. Not because you completed some healing checklist. But because you stopped trying to be anything other than exactly who you are. Slower, softer, still here, still enough. You were never broken, just buried. Under all the noise, under all the roles, under all the ways you learned to survive, when the world didn't know how to hold your softness. And now, as you loosen your grip on the plans, on the pace, on the endless pressure, you begin to hear something you haven't heard in years. Your own voice, not the voice shaped by fear or filtered through control, but the one that rises from your soul, gentle, unrushed, honest. That voice doesn't say do more. It says you've done enough. It says you don't have to hold it all. It says you're allowed to rest. And maybe that's the point, not to become the most healed, most grounded, most enlightened version of yourself, but to become the truest one. The one who can sit in a storm without trying to name the lesson. The one who can be misunderstood without unraveling. The one who can feel joy without scanning for the ending. Because the truth is, you were never meant to master life. You were meant to meet it, not with armor, but with openness. Not with a strategy, but with a heart that trusts itself to come undone and still be whole. So if any part of this reached you, even a small breath, even a soft yes, then let it be enough. You don't need to write a plan. You don't need to change everything tomorrow. You don't even need to remember this forever. You just need to be here now, in this breath, in this body, in this truth that your worth never lived in control, it lived in your presence. And now that you've stopped gripping, you can feel it. Not as a concept, not as a goal, but as a knowing deep and wordless. You are still here, and you are still enough, even especially when you let go.